Otherwise on SAFM.
Thanks very much, Asanda. Absolutely, it's Otherwise, talking women here on SAFM today. And today, the team is on Wabo Fani and Hazel Makuzeni. Hope you're going to stay with us right through until 2 o'clock. It's our Wednesday help desk, and what we have on the agenda today is miscarriage. Well, it may be something you dread. It may even be something you've experienced more than once even. And it could be something with which you've had help, or maybe you've just had to deal with it all by yourself. And for sure, if it's happened to you, you will have certainly heard the experience of so many others, because once you've admitted that you've had a miscarriage, so many other people come to the fore with their stories as well. But that's what we're looking at today in the light of certainly cricket captain Graham Smith's wife Morgan having recently spoken out about a miscarriage that she had last year. That is a miscarriage. There are a number of different types of miscarriage. We'll be hearing more in just a minute. But only now that she's nearing the last trimester, I think, of her second pregnancy, did she feel that she was able to talk about it. So that's kind of what triggered this. But certainly it didn't really need triggering, because you just know so many people, certainly I do, and I'm sure you do too, so many people who've experienced miscarriages. Well, to help us through it, to answer your questions, in the studio with me, I have Dr. Nomatam Sankwa Matabisi. She is a specialist in reproductive medicine from the Cape Fertility Clinic. And if you would like to call with your questions or your experience or something that you have to say, now is the time to do it. And the number is 0892 10 2010. 0892 10 2010. But first, going to have a quick look at what's news. Well, I don't need to repeat that dreadful story of the young woman from Soweto raped by 7 young men between the ages of 14 and 20. And as the Minister said there, an abhorrent crime that we certainly rise up against. Hopefully it will make people open their eyes and do something. We already had a Facebook response on this from Carissa Samuel. She says, "Hi Nancy and Hazel. One of the worst stories today, the mentally disabled girl being gang raped. People are asking for the link to see the video, and this truly disturbs me. What could someone gain from watching the torture of this poor girl? Where is our empathy for her? How did they get access to her in the first place? Someone needs to protect our young girls. Rape is an horrific crime that they have in fact committed with this poor girl more than once, and they should not be tried as minors. We should serve rapists with harsher sentences and make it easier for women and girls to report rape and sexual abuse." Well, here to most of that, absolutely. And if you'd like to send us your views, you're welcome to do that. Otherwise on SAFM, find us on our Facebook page, Otherwise on SAFM. Anything else you'd like to discuss there, most welcome. Moving on though, while Princess Anne's dress style has been criticised, and she has just arrived, I think, in the city, it's no doubt that she's here for a very good cause, to mark her mother's longevity on the British throne, but also to mark the 100-day countdown to the London Olympics, and it certainly looks like South Africa will be well represented. Well, listen out for more of that on the SAFM sports shows, lots of them, game plans, Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon. But nice to see a picture of our captain of Banyana Banyana, South African women Olympic soccer team, Amanda Dlamini, very proudly with her proud mother, Sibo Sisiwe. Well, Amanda is one of many athletes at the event who will be at the event, who Procter & Gamble have urged to thank their mums. They've got a campaign that just started called Thank Your Mum. It's a very good call, because without a mum, I suppose a person wouldn't really be here. But the chances are that a good many athletes may have had the support and encouragement from their mums as well. So nice one, Procter & Gamble. And nice things that they're doing at the London Olympics. They are encouraging young people all over the world, not least here in South Africa, to take up sport, to get themselves a brighter future. Lovely. Not so much luck, though, for the soccer-loving 28-year-old Tanyan Sheldon, whose body was found in a field in Strandfontein here in the Western Cape. And worse on this story is that she is in fact the third child of Father Arthur Sheldon, whose 2 other sons were also murdered in the last decade. How can anybody support such losses? Meanwhile, the DA and the Minister of Women and Children and the Ministry of Women, Children and People with Disabilities are in a bit of a verbal battle over the department's overspending in some areas, drastic underspending in others, notably in the field of people with disabilities. Meanwhile, I notice with questions surrounding the multi-billion arms deal still in the air, South Africa may be forced to spend billions more in arms acquisitions over the next couple of decades. Which brings to mind, I can't remember the whole story, but the line to something to the effect, why doesn't the army have a cake sale to fund its guns? Something like that. I'm sure you know the one I'm referring to. And then on the green front, thousands of people without water in Deep Sloot, and there have been for many days. And that's as a result of a broken water pipe and sewage contaminating the water there. Well, as we heard yesterday on the green front, hundreds of billions are going to be needed to be spent on getting our water infrastructure up to speed over the next decade to prevent this sort of thing happening. Just nearly lastly, in Afghanistan, though, it's thought that the 150 schoolgirls who drank contaminated water were in fact deliberately poisoned by conservative radicals opposing the education of females. Who knows? But on the brighter note on the health front, I spoke just earlier today to a very, very pregnant friend who's sick as a dog with flu, not able to really take anything very much. But what you can do, and here's a little tip from Move magazine, is you can make yourself a hot drink, particularly soothing when you're feeling really rotten. A helpful concoction they suggest is juice of 1 lemon, 1 teaspoonful of honey, 1 teaspoonful of chopped thyme, 2.5 centimetres of grated fresh ginger, and a chopped up garlic clove, all mixed together, heated gently and drunk down. Not sure about the garlic and make you smell pretty terrible, but if it makes you feel better, hey. You're listening to Otherwise. Stay with us.
Otherwise on SAFM.
It is indeed Otherwise, and hoping that you're going to stay with us and join us even here on the show today. It's a Wednesday help desk, and what we're talking about is miscarriage, something that happens so often. Sometimes it's spoken about, sometimes it's not, and sometimes a girl can even have a miscarriage without even knowing that she's pregnant, I think. But pretty much always it's very, very painful emotionally. There are many different types, and as we heard there earlier, the captain, Protea Captain Graham Smith's wife, Morgan, a young Irish lass, I think she is, she just finally spoke out about her, or she may be Welsh, I'm not sure, I have to get my facts right, but she just spoke out about her miscarriage that she suffered last year. In fact, it was a missed miscarriage, something that I actually hadn't heard of before, but we're going to find out all about the different types of miscarriage. And if you've got questions about it, if you've got an experience that you'd like to share, something that made you feel better after your miscarriage, and maybe the good news that you too got pregnant again, like the Smiths, they are now pregnant, I think, moving into their last trimester. Do give us a call. We're on 0892 10 2010. 0892 10 2010. Well, we have in the studio Dr. Nomatamsankwa Matabese, she's assisted, I can call her Dr. Tam Tam, which is a whole lot easier. Lovely to have you with us, Dr. Tam Tam. Miscarriage, I've been saying that it is so very common. Do we have any statistics at all? Do we know how many pregnancies result in or end in miscarriage?
Yes, thank you, Nancy, and good afternoon to the listeners. It's quite a difficult question because, as you've alluded earlier, most miscarriages will occur early, that is even before they've missed a period. So that is about 50% of miscarriages, and a woman might not even be aware. They might just think that their period for that month was a bit heavier. But there is a few statistics which would confirm that most miscarriages, about 15 to 20% of pregnancies, would end up in a miscarriage. Yeah,
that's a high figure.
It is quite a high figure.
Is it? One fondly thinks maybe it's God's way of saying this isn't right. This has got to stop. Why those very early ones, the ones where perhaps a woman might even not know that she was pregnant? Why do they occur?
Yes, what you just said just now, it is actually one of nature's way of sorting things out, because most of the early miscarriages will occur because there is a problem with the baby itself. So we talk of genetics. In most cases, it means that there was a chromosomal problem, so that something is wrong with the genetic makeup of the baby. And hence, then, one of nature's way of taking care of that is to expel the pregnancy, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, but good to hear, because I'm sure in miscarriage there would be a great deal of guilt. Perhaps the mother might feel that it was her fault, that she did something wrong. Maybe she had sex too soon. Maybe she shouldn't have been running and jumping when she shouldn't have been. Or so, do you find that that's often the case, that a woman will feel guilty?
Exactly as you say, Nancy. So it's usually so reassuring for most of the women to actually hear that there was a problem with the baby and that it's nothing that they did or didn't do that caused the miscarriage, and that would be the case in most early miscarriages.
Can you just explain the chromosome thing? I read here that that it's the fetus's chromosomes with which there's something wrong. What does that really mean? You say it's genetic.
Yes, basically, one way to try and simplify it is that our bodies are made up of multiple small cells, and those cells contain genetic makeup. And as the baby forms, those cells multiply. So your genetic makeup is getting more and more. So if there is an error, and there's a lot of errors that can occur during that process. So if there is an error in that multiplication of cells, you can actually then get a genetically abnormal fetus. So if I were to give you an example, females' genetic makeup is supposed to be 46XX, and sometimes you get a deletion or absence of one of those 46 chromosomes. So the fetus would then end up with 45. That is an entity we would call Turner's syndrome. And then most of those fetuses then would end up in a miscarriage.
So that's if there's something wrong with the fetus. Can a miscarriage also happen because there's something wrong? Or when I say something wrong, there's a problem with the mother's carrying.
Yes, exactly. So we actually, when we talk of miscarriages, I like to classify them and say the causes are either something wrong with the fetus itself, something wrong with the placental development. The placenta is what is sometimes called the afterbirth, which is the part that will support the pregnancy. And in some cases, something is actually wrong, or there is a medical condition that the mother has, which will then lead to a miscarriage. And then just to mention a few of the problems with the mother, so those would be things like some conditions such as uncontrolled diabetes. I would just like to note there that having diabetes doesn't necessarily mean you will have a miscarriage if it is well controlled before you fall pregnant. So uncontrolled diabetes would be one of them. Uncontrolled hypertension, which is raised blood pressure. Infections, so if the mother has untreated infections such as syphilis, such as herpes, just to mention a few common ones such as toxoplasmosis, those can lead to the mother then getting a miscarriage. And then there are other medical conditions. If something is wrong with the genital tract itself, like an abnormality in the uterus, or if one would say the womb itself, so it could either be that the womb didn't develop normally in that mother when she herself was developing as a fetus, so we would call that a congenital anomaly of the uterus. You find that sometimes women have almost like what we call a septum, which can divide the uterus almost into two cavities. And if that baby implants on that septum, then there won't be enough blood supply to support that pregnancy, and that can end up in a miscarriage. Yes.
As you describe all these possibilities, it's not surprising then that 15 to 20% of miscarriages happen. In fact, it's surprising that there aren't more. Do they usually happen right in the very early stages? Is there a dividing line? I mean, everybody's very sort of nervous about the first 3 months. Is it usually then that they happen?
Yes. Most miscarriages will happen in the first 3 months. So we divide the pregnancy into trimesters. So I would be referring to it as the first trimester. So most miscarriages will happen there. And if with those miscarriages, though, normally in most cases the cause would be a chromosomal problem. So if you're starting to get miscarriages in the second trimester, that's when you think more of structural problems or even maternal medical conditions, as I've just mentioned.
One of the things that one's heard about, which seems so tragic and so cruel, is when people have multiple miscarriages and they keep on having miscarriages. I'd like to get to that in just a minute.
Yes.
Also like to get onto the different types of miscarriage, and I believe that there are a number. So let's get onto those in just a minute. In the meantime, we are talking about miscarriage, and if you've got an experience or you've got a question, now is the time to phone. The number is 0892 10 2010. 0892 10 2010.
It's time to get ready to roll on Gauteng's e-roads. E-tags are available from dedicated e-toll outlets at shopping malls, e-toll customer centers along the Gauteng e-road, and from selected Checkers, Pick n Pay and ShopRite stores. If you're a group of 50 or more, call 0800 Sunral or 0800 726 725 and we'll bring your e-tags to you. To qualify for the discounts, get tagged. There is more to know, so keep an eye on the press for details.
Mzansi's #1 entertainment channel. How may I help you?
Hello, I'm phoning on behalf of Selima Tunzi, Jameli, Jiga Majiga, and Mzansi Insider.
Is there a problem?
All of them are moving.
Moving where?
They will no longer be playing at their usual 6 p.m. times. From the 11th of April, Mzansi Insider, Selima Tunzi, and and Jamali will now be moving to the 6:30 time slot.
What about Chigama Chiga?
Jigama Jiga will now be moving to Wednesday, 7 p.m.
Street names are changing, now programs are changing too. It seems like everybody wants change. Same programs, different times. Mzansi's #1 entertainment channel, only on SABC1.
For sure.
Otherwise on SAFM.
Otherwise, it is Talking Women here on SAFM, and today on our Wednesday help desk we are talking miscarriage, what to do about it, what it is, why it happens, and all those many questions. And if you'd like to give us a call with your question, 0892 10 2010. Dr. Tam Tam, though, with us from the Cape Fertility Clinic. Just want to go through, we're going to get a few callers, but I just want to go through some of the different types of miscarriages and also why it is that some women have multiple miscarriages. Let's have a look at the different types first and foremost.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so there are quite a few types. I hope we will have time to just say something briefly about each one. Okay, so the first one would be what we call a threatened miscarriage. So basically that means that the woman will come in with a bit of bleeding, but when you actually examine them, you'll find that the mouth of the womb, which we refer to as the cervix, is still closed. And in most cases, when you do a scan, an ultrasound, you'll find that the baby's heartbeat is present. So then in that case, we would then advise the woman that it's threatening to be a miscarriage, but the baby appears fine. The problem, though, is that nobody can predict whether it's going to continue to become a miscarriage. But we know from studies that if you've seen the heartbeat, in most cases, just with a bit of bed rest, the bleeding will settle and the pregnancy will continue.
Bed rest is the answer. Okay.
Yes, so bed rest, even though there is no real, studies to prove that, but bed rest is the only thing you can do. And women should avoid then going from one doctor to the other because, as I've said, there's nothing you can do about that except just rest and wait and see what happens. And then the second type then would be just a follow-on from that. So it can start off as a threatening miscarriage and then continue to be what we call an inevitable miscarriage. So basically then that means that there would be bleeding, there would be some cramping, and when you were to examine that woman, you'll find that now the cervix, or I can refer to it as the mouth of the womb, would suddenly be open. So once the cervix is open, that is telling you that the miscarriage is going to happen. It's usually just a matter of time before it actually ends up being a miscarriage. And then the next type then would be either a complete or an incomplete miscarriage. That basically means that that miscarriage, you can have the uterus expelling all the contents. Then when you examine that woman, you would suddenly find that that cervix is closed again. And then that means that that whole pregnancy has been expelled. There is no pregnancy tissue that is actually left in the uterus itself. And then you can also get an incomplete miscarriage, which is quite unfortunate because then it means that some of the products of conception are left inside the womb. So then that woman would probably need a procedure where they get taken to theater and then the uterus is now cleaned out just to expel all those contents, those products of conception. It is sometimes referred to as a DNC. DNC meaning dilatation and curettage, which means you dilate to open the cervix and then you just curate the products out of the uterus. But I prefer to use the term evacuation of the uterus when you are referring to a miscarriage, because a DNC is sometimes indicated for other gynecological procedures where there isn't a pregnancy present in the uterus. Okay.
The others, just briefly, the other types?
And then there would be what you've mentioned too, which unfortunately the princess had, which is called the missed miscarriage. This is one which is very confusing for most women and very distressing, because they would have a pregnancy test which would confirm that they are pregnant. You would do scans, and in most cases all you see is the sac where the baby would have been. So you just see what we call a gestational sac, but the actual fetal part fails to develop, which is very tragic. And in most cases then you just monitor and you can do another scan. If there's still no development of fetal parts, then you know that we then call it a missed miscarriage, that something has actually gone wrong with the development and the implantation. So you eventually might end up needing to do an evacuation of the uterus if that sac is not spontaneously expelled from the uterus. And then just one more very important one is what we call a septic miscarriage, which women need to watch out for. That basically means that the products of conception have now become infected. This is why it is important, if a woman has missed a period and suddenly has some funny bleeding that they're not sure of, that they should actually consult their doctor or mostly a gynecologist, because it could be that there are some products of conception which are being retained by the uterus which get infected. The problem with this one is that it has implications for the future in terms of it can cause damage to the uterus, to the fallopian tubes, and impair future fertility.
Whew, what a lot of cautionary things, but thank you for spelling all that out. We've got Selo on the line from Mokopane, and if you'd like to give us a call, 0892 10 20 10. Let's find out your question. Hi, Selo.
Hi.
Yes, we can hear you, just. Okay, Selo, I tell you what, we actually can't hear you. Your line's not very good. Going to get Hazel to give you a call back again, and maybe we can get a clearer line. We'd really like to hear what your question is, okay? Okay, let's do that then. Hazel's going to try and get Selo back on the line, but if you'd like to give us a call, 0892 10 20 10. The symptoms of, whether it's any one of these different types of miscarriage, is generally what? Bleeding?
In most cases, yes. A woman would have had a pregnancy test, or they would have missed a period, so they would be suspecting they are pregnant or even know. But the commonest symptom is bleeding. So if you see bleeding when you know you are pregnant, you need to seek medical attention, because that could be the beginning of a miscarriage.
And particularly in the case of this, is it septic miscarriage you call it?
Yes.
Particularly in that case, I would imagine you'd feel pretty bad. Is a woman, and we do know that women have a sort of degree of intuition, is she likely to feel not good? Is she likely to feel that something's wrong, even if there's no bleeding necessarily? And should she follow that instinct?
Yes, exactly. Because if there is a septic miscarriage, you might even get some other symptoms, such as a bit of fever. You feel unwell. You might get a bit of cramping and a very smelly discharge. So suddenly the bleeding, instead of just being a little bit of spotting, might become quite offensive. So one should be careful of that. Yes.
The other question is it more likely to happen in a younger woman or an older woman, or does it not really make any difference?
Well, age is one of the determining factors. The older you become, the more the chances of getting a miscarriage. So if I were to put it in percentages, which is quite frightening, and I hope I don't frighten some of the listeners, is that at the age of 40, a woman has about 50% chance that the pregnancy will end up in a miscarriage, which is, quite a big difference as compared to a woman of age 25 who has maybe about a 12% chance that her pregnancy will end up in a miscarriage.
Something to know if you're thinking of having a baby later on in life, that can happen. And I suppose ways of avoiding it? Is this a case of nature saying, sorry, this is it?
It depends, as I said. I mean, if it is a chromosomal problem, then there's not much one can do about it. But as one needs to mention, is that it's also important to make sure that if you do have comorbidities or other illnesses, that those are well controlled natal before you counseling or prenatal. So we talk about consultation, where actually a woman who's got diabetes, high blood pressure, endocrine diseases, especially things like thyroid disease, Cushing's, polycystic ovarian syndrome, women who've got autoimmune diseases such as SLE or systemic lupus erythematosus. All those women need to make sure that they actually see their gynecologist whilst they are planning the pregnancy, to make sure that the conditions are well controlled before conception.
It does make you realise that pregnancy and childbirth is not something that should be taken lightly. There are all sorts of issues around it, and that's what we're talking about right now here on Otherwise. We're talking about miscarriage. If you'd like to give us a call, 0892 10 2010. But right now we're talking about miscarriage here on Otherwise, and so many issues coming up. And if you'd like to give us a call, you're welcome. The number is 0892 10 2010. We're talking to Dr. Noma Tamsankwa Matabese. She's from the Cape Fertility Clinic. And 0892 10 2010, once again, if you'd like to give us a call. We still have to talk about multiple miscarriages, and that is something that's quite a big issue from what I understand. But let's take your calls. We've got Zena on the line from Boksburg. Hi, Zena.
Hello, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. Tell us about you.
Yes, I was actually surprised. I heard the doctor just speaking about lupus right now, because I had about 3 miscarriages at 2 months. I'll just have brown spotting, and then afterwards, I'll be told there's no heartbeat and there's nothing. So I went to this gynecology doctor, and he diagnosed me with, he said it's phospholipid syndrome. And I get these injections for the whole of the pregnancy, and I have 3 beautiful babies right now. So I just wanted to know, what does Disprin play? Because, what role does it play? Because before I was told you're not supposed to be getting Disprin when you're pregnant. And I was actually surprised because that's one of the medications that I got.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, Senna, thank you very much for that. And I'm really sorry you had to go through that. But I'm happy for you that you've got 3 beautiful children now.
Yeah.
Yes, you see, the condition you have, the antiphospholipid syndrome, that basically means that your body, it's an immune problem. Your body suddenly makes, if I were to say, antibodies against itself.
Yeah.
So basically what that then does is that it thickens. Women with antiphospholipid syndrome have got a tendency to clot. So the blood becomes a bit thick. And you see, when you are pregnant, then that can interfere with the circulation of blood in the placenta. As you know, the pregnancy is supported by the placenta or the afterbirth. So the reason that you were given the aspirin is because aspirin is one of the medications that we use to thin the blood. That would then improve the flow of blood in the placenta and hence help to support the pregnancy. As you said, the other thing that is used is those injections called heparin. Heparin also is an anticoagulant, which also means that it's also used to actually thin the blood, to improve the circulation, so to prevent those antibodies from making your blood to form clots. So that is why it helped for you. And thank you for bringing that up, Zinith.
Oh, thanks a lot, sir.
And wonderful that you've got 3 babies since. That's just so encouraging. So that tells us everything we need to know, that it is always possible. Blessings, Zina. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Wait.
Bye-bye.
0892 10 2010. If you've got questions around miscarriage, give us a call. We've got Sandra on the line from Cape Town. Hi, Sandra.
Hello, Nancy. Thank you for taking my call. I don't want to ask a question. I just want to tell what happened to me. I'm 50 years old now, and I have 2 teenage children. But about just after I got married, I fell pregnant, and I didn't even know what a miscarriage was. And about 3 months into my pregnancy, I had a miscarriage. And what was so horrible, I told the whole world I was pregnant. And then you had to face the people and say, they all say, how's the pregnancy coming on? How are you doing? And then, sorry, I lost a baby. And you feel absolutely horrific. And the next time when I fell pregnant, a couple of years later, I decided with my husband not to tell anybody for at least 4 or 5 months. And that, I would say, is the advice that I can give, is because one is nervous the second time. Will it happen again, etc., etc. And just to protect yourself, just only tell very close to you. And if you can survive, in inverted commas, the first trimester, then, as the doctor said, then hopefully the chances are better. But it is horrific when it happens to you.
Oh, shame. We've lost Sandra. That's a pity, because I was going to say, I hear what she says. I was going to say to her, is that even worse to deal with? Because already it must be bad enough to deal with a miscarriage yourself and your partner, if you're lucky enough to be with your partner. But to have to deal with everybody else saying, oh, I'm terribly sorry, or I've also had 6 miscarriages, and telling all this, must be really, really hard. Sorry we weren't able to hear the end of your story, but thank you, Sandra. We got Mahotso from Durban. Hi there.
Hello, Nancy, and your guest. How are you?
Thank you. Well.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the topic. I just wanted to share an experience that I've had as well. I also have 4 bundles of joy. I've had 2 miscarriages, but the last pregnancy, I had a condition which a specialist that I went to, referred to by my gynecologist, said I had a blood sac. So I was bleeding for probably 5 months of my pregnancy, and I was carrying twins.
Did you say a blood sac?
That's what it as a huge. It looked like a dead baby, but the specialist that I went to said I had a blood sac, so I will bleed up to a point where the blood is not coming out. So at 6 months, it sort of wears off, and I was not bleeding anymore, but I was like heavily bleeding. I did not understand the condition, and I was frightened for the babies because I was carrying twins, as I'm saying. I just want to understand what is that condition, and for somebody that might have the same thing. But I must say that I had 2 healthy bundle of joys, which are 3 years old now, and I had no problem at all with the babies.
Wow, gosh. Any views on that, Dr.
Yes,
Tamta?
yes, hi, yes. I'm so glad that your pregnancy went on very well. It sounds to me like what you had was a little bit of bleeding behind the placenta. Sometimes you get that, and you were lucky because at times then that continues and the placenta can separate from the wall of the womb, of the uterus, and you can end up with a miscarriage. So you were very fortunate that it didn't continue. But sometimes you bleed a little bit behind the placenta, and it actually, the bleeding stops. You know, it forms a clot and the body just absorbs that. That's probably what happened, because you say you had serial scans and your gynecologist actually said then the problem resolved.
Yes, it was resolved.
Yes, it can happen. Unfortunately, there is no way of predicting who's going to get that, and there's not even a way of predicting which way it's going to go. So you were, as I say, fortunate that that bleeding stopped. Yeah, it can happen. Yeah,
Lovely. It was obviously meant to be. Mahot, so lovely. Congratulations.
Thanks very much, Nancy.
Look after your little ones. Thank
it's
you.
a pleasure, Nancy.
0892 10 2010, as I say, well, at least I don't think I did say, but I was thinking that, you know, there are as many different types of miscarriages as there are the women who have them, because everybody will have their own story. We've got Vicky on the line from Durban to tell us hers. Hi, Vicky.
Hi. I'm much older even than the 50. I'm over 60. But I just want to give my experience of about 40 years ago. And I just think women today are so fortunate in that there is so much knowledge about pregnancy and miscarriage. I had one child. For my second child, I was actually 5.5 months pregnant, nearly 6 months, when I was told the baby had died in utero. And because of the inability to do things in those days, and because of the amount of fluid I had, I had to carry the child the dead child for nearly 6 months, 6 weeks. 6 weeks before they could actually, and then it came away naturally. But I was just listening to the other lady who told all her friends. This was very difficult because I still appeared to be pregnant. And I just wanted to share that and just say how very, very fortunate women are today.
Yeah.
I'll listen to your response on the radio.
Lovely. Thank you so much
Thank you.
for sharing that.
Okay, bye.
Certainly not lovely at the time. That sounds to me more like stillbirth and miscarriage.
Yes.
Is there a line between stillbirth and miscarriage?
Well, there is. It just depends on, you know, how you look at it. The World Health Organization, which is the WHO, will actually define any pregnancy that is expelled live or stillborn, which is less than 500 grams, as a miscarriage.
Okay.
But any pregnancy or fetus that comes out weighing more than 500 grams, then that would be referred to as a stillborn rather than a miscarriage if there was no heartbeat, if the fetus was not alive.
Vicky was saying, sorry.
Yes, it is quite tragic, and I feel very bad for Vicky. And I mean, she is quite right in saying that at least nowadays we have ways of making diagnosis, we have ways of trying to prevent stillbirths, because as one of the callers alluded earlier, I mean, conditions like antiphospholipid syndrome that we've spoken about can lead to stillbirths. And one of the ways now is to give that aspirin and the heparin, and we don't get, you know, that's stillbirth anymore.
I suppose we are lucky in as much as medical technology has moved on, and in some cases there's a lot of counselling and there's a lot more sympathy, but in many cases it doesn't happen for everybody. There are an awful lot of women, and certainly in this country, who don't get that sort of benefit. And just listening to those sort of sad stories and the grief that would accompany such a miscarriage, one wonders if that would perhaps interfere with a woman falling pregnant again. And my next question would be is, how soon can you try for another one? And is the fact that you're very unhappy, still grieving, going to interfere?
There's actually quite a few different schools of thought on that one. I personally, this is just anecdotal, believe that it is actually an emotional and stressful event. And I think that the woman should actually first heal emotionally. But from a physiological point of view, I would think that after one cycle, as in after getting one period, there is no reason why you cannot continue to conceive. But I still think that, you know, the emotions involved and the stress involved just requires that the woman is sure that they've actually healed emotionally before they fall pregnant again.
And I suppose both she and her partner, because although it's happening to her body, there will be mutual grief. 0892 10 2010 if you'd like to join us. We're talking about miscarriage. I have Dr. Noma Tamsankwa on the line, or Matabise. She's with the Cape Fertility Clinic, and I'll give out those details in just a minute. But we've got Sonia who's waiting from Johannesburg. Hi, Sonia.
Hi. Technology does come with a price tag, I must say. Anyway, I've had 2 failed IVFs, right, with my own eggs. Then I had another one about 3 weeks ago with a donor egg. Doctor had done a whole lot of blood tests, and found out that this one, that I have certain antibodies where it's basically rejecting foreign bodies from entering my body. And with that, he had given me intragram, right? So basically,
Sonia, just spell that for us. Intragram.
Intragram, yeah, it's injections given to you while on the treatment with donor eggs.
Okay.
Right. Unfortunately, that didn't work. I've got FETs currently, and he wants to do another one, but changing the medication with IVIG. And he's also given me that Ecotrin. And what I read about that Ecotrin, it does affect implantation of the embryo after the transfer. So I don't know, would this IVIG assist with the next IVF cycle? Because right now I'm menopausal. I'm 35 years old.
Okay. Okay, gosh, what a journey you've been through, Sonia. But let's let the doctor respond.
Yes,
all right.
Yes, Sonia, I'm really sorry that you had to go through all that. It sounds quite tough.
It's been the worst ever, you know. And we haven't told anyone what we're going through, and it's we all are all alone, you know. It's really tough.
Yes. Just before I answer your question there, Sonia, have you sought any kind of psychological support?
I'm actually seeing a psychologist at the moment,
because I think that just helps so that, you keep your relationship healthy as well, because this is, can be quite traumatic and have a huge impact even on your marriage, so one has to be very careful about that.
Yeah.
But
your husband's being very supportive, and he's very positive with this whole thing, that it's going to work. And
and then to answer the second part of your question, there is quite conflicting scientific evidence at the moment, about the presence of there's all these immune theories and uterine natural killer cells. I think that's why you were given we call it intralipids. I think you referred to it as intragram. You see, just to give you the short answer to that is that at the moment it's experimental. Some women respond to it and some women don't. So, no one can actually say to you that it's an absolute must, because as you know, in science, until something is 100% scientifically proven, then whilst it's still experimental, it's really difficult, to answer that question. I think your doctor felt because you have the antibodies, it's worth a try, but there is no guarantee that it will work.
Okay, he wants to try the IVIG, that intravenous one.
Yes.
So I'm keen to that. As I said, we really want a baby desperately.
Yes,
so at any odds, As I said, it does come with a huge price tag.
Yes.
So I want to go for it, but how soon? Because my last failed one was 2 weeks ago. And I've got 2 FETs, and so how soon can I start with that? And should I go for that IVIG now? Because he says that will be the last stroke.
You see, it's very difficult for me to comment on that. As I said, it's still experimental. So if you go for it, then you have to be aware that there is no guarantee it's going to work. But there are times where, if there is a bit of hope, then you just want to try it anyway. Yes, and then like I said before, physiologically, there is no reason for you to wait, but I still might be a little bit worried about the emotional aspect because you've just had one failed cycle. I just am wondering if you are feeling strong enough to actually start another frozen embryo transfer cycle at the moment.
Did you also say that you were menopausal?
Yeah.
Okay.
Early menopausal,
Very early. Would that have an impact?
Well, not in this case because she is using donor eggs, as she has said. So that would not wouldn't really have an impact.
Okay.
Yes.
Sonia, all our fingers are crossed for you. So good luck.
Okay,
Don't
thanks
give
a
up.
lot. Thank you.
Fantastic.
All right.
Thank you. 0892 10 2010. The things women really do go through. It's quite heartbreaking. 0892 10 2010. Well, we have a man on the line. We have Winston from Johannesburg. Hi, Winston.
Hello, Nancy. Thanks for taking my call.
Sorry to keep you
And
waiting.
it is just to congratulate you for the expert, Dr. Nomatam Sangma, that you've got on the show. Even as an old man of 60-something, it's just a pleasure listening to somebody who's such an expert on the subject and presenting it with such humility. My praise for her that she can just progress and spread the word. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
Sure.
Winston.
Nice. Well, I heartily concur, because I was just saying that it's so nice to have somebody who explains things in simple terms that even those of us who are not medically gifted can understand. 0892 10 2010 if you would like to have some information as well. We got John on the line from Cape Town. Hi, John.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, this process is very traumatic process for the individual and for the couples and even for the family also. And I just want to know, was there research done 30 years ago till today? What is the rate? Is it higher or lower than today?
It's a good question. Is it more frequent, do you think?
Thank you. I'm listening on the radio.
Okay, thanks, John.
Well, the chance of a miscarriage hasn't changed much, to answer that question, because as I said earlier, mostly it's chromosomal problems in the first trimester, and there's no way of predicting or preventing that. So I think that contributes quite a bit, to the rate still being the same.
However, I suppose, the second part of that question that John just raised is, we're leading very different lifestyles now. There are all sorts of lifestyle diseases. Some of the diseases you mentioned, diabetes, hypertension, a lot of them are to do with are lifestyle related. We lead a lot of stress, all these things that are more difficult to pin down. One would imagine possibly those are contributing factors to increasing miscarriage.
Yes, definitely. As you say, people have busy lives, they live stressful lives. Even a simple thing like controlling the diabetes, you'll be, surprised to find out how many actually even educated women who have the condition that is still not well controlled, just mainly because they don't have enough time to make sure the diet is proper, to exercise, as you say, the lifestyle, the busyness, working women, so that contributes quite a lot.
It's a paradox, isn't it? Because there's so much information out there, and yet we are so very busy a lot of the time, especially when you're at childbearing age. A woman tends to be very busy doing all sorts of things. 0892 10 2010. I still want to get onto the question of the multiple miscarriages, but let's take Miriam on the line from Joburg. Hi, Miriam.
Hello, how are you, Jenny?
I'm Nancy. I'm well, thank you.
And hi to the doctor.
Yes, hi.
Yeah, this is very educating. I've been listening, and I'm talking as a grandmother, a young grandmother anyway. I've got two daughter-in-laws who went through miscarriages, and, it was 3 months after one had a miscarriage, and it was traumatizing. It was as if we've got death in the family, and you don't know how to handle them, how to sympathize with them. You just hug and cry with them. But it's a traumatizing situation.
Was it very recent? Are they? How long ago was it for both of them?
Okay, actually it was last year when they both, and the youngest at least now has got a baby. But the elder one, you always look at her and think, oh my God, she's still thinking. And you can actually see it in her that, she's not handling that very well. She's been through counseling and whatever. But I think when she's around babies, especially with the younger daughter-in-law, she's always has this that, when am I falling pregnant?
Dr. Tam, any advice? Any advice on because it is difficult. It is difficult for all the families. So, it's as if we have death in the family, and yet it isn't, because maybe it's a good thing, because maybe things would not have been all right with that baby, which is why it's happened. What advice can one offer as a family member? Miriam, this one is for you.
Yes. Hi, Miriam. Yes, I'm really sorry to hear that about your daughters-in-law. Yes, I always feel that the psychosocial aspects of medical conditions are quite neglected. And you see, that's why we talk of what we call multidisciplinary approach, that actually, in an ideal world, women who've gone through that, a woman who's had a miscarriage should actually be seen by her gynecologist, and should actually be seen by a psychologist, and even a social worker. Because as you say, it is quite a traumatic event, and we actually quite neglect that and focus mostly on the medical aspects of disease. Because I think counseling is very important, even family counseling, as you say, because when we sit with the patient, one tends to forget that patient is going to go out there back into society and have to face all these pressures from society.
And another
about not
thing
having
is
children.
I would like to say, even my sons, especially the eldest son, he withdrew from us. He withdrew from friends and whatever until I sort of tapped into his interpersonal space and said, you know what? Maybe this child wasn't meant to be. Maybe you were going to struggle with this child, and it's God's gift. It will come when it's the right time.
I think all you can do, Mariam, is just offer some support, but perhaps you should advise your son to even seek psychological counseling, just see somebody who can help him deal with these issues. He can go on his own, or they can go as a couple.
They went as a couple.
Yes.
Well, they are lucky that they have a supportive and caring family. So, Miriam, very best of luck to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
0892 10 2010. I really do want to get onto multiple births, but we've also been keeping Bridget waiting from Richards Bay. Hi, Bridget.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Yes, I've had 2 miscarriages. One, it was on 2010 February. I was about 7 months, and then I had another one this January. I was about 6 months pregnant. Is it possible that I can have another miscarriage?
Yes,
if
hi,
I fall
Bridget.
pregnant again. If I fall pregnant again.
Yes. I'll tell you what, Bridget, we were just about to talk about what we call recurrent miscarriages. You see, you've had 2, what I would refer to as second trimester, because they are after the first 12 weeks of pregnancy, miscarriages. You definitely, my advice to you would be actually to see your gynecologist before you fall pregnant again, because you probably need to have some investigations to see what could be causing these miscarriages. As we said initially, that there are some conditions that we can give medication or some treatments to try and prevent miscarriages. And also just to say a little bit more, sometimes, when we sit with you before the pregnancy, we take a history just to find out, because there is sometimes a problem that we call a weakness of the mouth of the womb. We refer to it as cervical incompetence. And usually those women will have miscarriages later on in the pregnancy, like you said. And the problem there is that the mouth of the womb, for some reason, could be congenital, that you were born like that, doesn't close properly. So as the pregnancy grows, the mouth of the womb begins to open. And usually then that miscarriage is quick and painless. So yes, I feel like you are wanting to tell us something. Yes. Carry on, Bridget.
Well, yeah, because I've recovered. Because the first time they said that my blood pressure was high. The first time, but this time no, I had no blood pressure. My blood pressure was very good, but it just happened.
Yes, I would advise that you actually go and see a gynecologist, because you need to have some investigations, preferably outside of pregnancy, just to see what is going on before you actually fall pregnant again.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Bridget. And we're listening to Dr. Nomatam Sankwa Matabesi. She's from the Cape Fertility Clinic. Incidentally, if you'd like to know more about what they do, www.capefertilityclinic.co.za. And in a minute, we really will find out a little bit more about multiple miscarriages. Stay with us.
Otherwise on SAFM.
Otherwise, women talking miscarriage on our Wednesday help desk. Sadly, we are not able to take more calls, but hopefully we will get the doctor back again at another stage, because there's lots of issues around here. The issue that I've been longing to ask about, though, is the issue of multiple miscarriages. So many women have, not just like Bridget from Richards Bay, not just one, but many. What is the reason usually for that?
You see, that is actually a big problem, because I will tell you that in most cases, about 50% of cases, you will not know what is causing the miscarriages. And the other problem is that even if you do know, there is not much in most cases that you can do about it. Say, for instance, it's a genetic problem coming from one of the parents. There is something we call a balanced translocation. So there is a problem with the genetic makeup of either the the father or the mother in the couple. All you can do there is to counsel them. The couple just needs to know that there is always a possibility that if the baby or the fetus inherits that genetic makeup, they might have a miscarriage. But there is also a possibility that they can end up with a completely healthy baby. So sometimes they have to go through a few miscarriages before they get the baby, which is tragic.
How many miscarriages do you go through before you finally say, I can't do that anymore?
That is a very difficult one. I've had patients who keep going. I've had one who's had 14 miscarriages, and the last time I saw her, she's still willing to try again. It is a very difficult one.
Whatever the circumstances, the best thing to do is get help. I think the point here being not to do it alone, because it is so very traumatic and exhausting. Dr. Tam Tam, lovely to have you with us on the show, and I'm going to give out the details once again of the Cape Fertility Clinic, because if you've got problems and you would like to know a little bit more, you can check their website and see if there are answers to your questions there. It's www.capefertilityclinic.co.za, capefertilityclinic.co.za, and if you'd like to phone, the number is 021 674 2088, 674 2088 021. And if you missed any of those details, get in touch with us at otherwise at safm.co.za, co.za.